Another day, another story. Egypt had one of the largest and most complex pantheons of gods of any civilization in the ancient world. Over the course of Egyptian history, hundreds of gods and goddesses were worshipped. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. The characteristics of individual gods could be hard to pin down. Most had a principal association, for example, with the sun or the underworld, and form. But these could change over time as gods rose and fell in importance and evolved in ways that corresponded to developments in Egyptian society. The mythology of ancient Egypt is rich and complex, featuring a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with their own unique characteristics, stories, and roles in the divine order. While it's challenging to cover the entire spectrum in one narrative, here's an overview of some key Egyptian deities. Osiris. Osiris, bronze figurine of the late period, in the Egyptian Museum, Berlin, courtesy of the Stylische Museum Preußischer Kulturbesitz, Berlin. Photograph, Art Resource, New York. Osiris, one of Egypt's most important deities, was god of the underworld. He also symbolized death, resurrection, and the cycle of Nile floods that Egypt relied on for agricultural fertility. According to the myth, Osiris was a king of Egypt who was murdered and dismembered by his brother Seth. His wife, Isis, reassembled his body and resurrected him, allowing them to conceive a son, the god Horus. He was represented as a mummified king, wearing wrappings that left only the green skin of his hands and face exposed. Osiris was a god of the afterlife, death, and resurrection. He was the brother and husband of Isis and the father of Horus. Osiris was initially a benevolent king who taught the Egyptians agriculture and civilization. However, his jealous brother Seth murdered him, leading to a famous myth of resurrection and divine justice. Isis. The origins of Isis are obscure. Unlike many gods, she can't be tied to a specific town, and there are no certain mentions of her in the earliest Egyptian literature. Over time she grew in importance, though, eventually becoming the most important goddess in the pantheon. As the devoted wife who resurrected Osiris after his murder and raised their son, Horus, Isis embodied the traditional Egyptian virtues of a wife and mother. Isis was a powerful goddess of magic, motherhood, and healing. She played a crucial role in the resurrection of Osiris and the protection of her son, Horus. Isis was often depicted with a throne-shaped headdress, symbolizing her role as the queen of the gods. As the wife of the god of the underworld, Isis was also one of the main deities concerned with rites for the dead. Along with her sister Nephthys, Isis acted as a divine mourner, and her maternal care was often depicted as extending to the dead in the underworld. Isis was one of the last of the ancient Egyptian gods to still be worshipped. In the Greco-Roman period she was identified with the Greek goddess Aphrodite, and her cult spread as far west as Great Britain and as far east as Afghanistan. It is believed that depictions of Isis with the infant Horus influenced Christian imagery of Mary with the infant Jesus. Horus. Depicted as a falcon or as a man with a falcon's head, Horus was a sky god associated with war and hunting. He was also the embodiment of the divine kingship, and in some eras the reigning king was considered to be a manifestation of Horus. Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, was a god associated with the sky, kingship, and protection. The pharaohs were considered the living embodiment of Horus on earth. The myth of the conflict between Horus and Set symbolized the struggle for the throne of Egypt and the triumph of order over chaos. According to the Osiris myth, Horus was the son of Isis and Osiris, magically conceived after the murder of Osiris by his brother Seth. Horus was raised to avenge his father's murder. One tradition holds that Horus lost his left eye fighting with Seth, but his eye was magically healed by the god Thoth. Because the right and left eyes of Horus were associated, respectively, with the sun and the moon, the loss and restoration of Horus's left eye gave a mythical explanation for the phases of the moon. Seth. Seth was the god of chaos, violence, deserts, and storms. In the Osiris myth, he is the murderer of Osiris. In some versions of the myth, he tricks Osiris into laying down in a coffin and then seals it shut. Set was the god of chaos, storms, and violence. He was often portrayed as a mysterious creature with an animal head resembling an aardvark or an unknown creature. Set's tumultuous relationship with his brother Osiris and his nephew Horus represented the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Seth's appearance poses a problem for Egyptologists. He is often depicted as an animal or as a human with the head of an animal. But they can't figure out what animal he's supposed to be. He usually has a long snout and long ears that are squared at the tips. In his fully animal form, he has a thin dog-like body and a straight tail with a tuft on the end. Many scholars now believe that no such animal ever existed and that the Seth animal is some sort of mythical composite. Papa. Papa was the head of a triad of gods worshipped at Memphis. The other two members of the triad were Papa's wife, the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet, and the god Nefertum, who may have been the couple's son. Papa's original association seems to have been with craftsmen and builders. The 4th dynasty architect Imhotep was deified after his death as a son of Papa. Scholars have suggested that the Greek word Aegyptos, the source of the name Egypt, may have started as a corruption of Hwt Ka Papa, the name of one of Papa's shrines. Re. One of several deities associated with the sun, the god Re was usually represented with a human body and the head of a hawk. It was believed that he sailed across the sky in a boat each day and then made a passage through the underworld each night, during which he would have to defeat the snake god Apis in order to rise again. Ra was the sun god and one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon. He was often depicted with a falcon head and a sun disk on his crown. Ra sailed across the sky during the day and journeyed through the underworld at night, representing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Re's cult was centered in Heliopolis, now a suburb of Cairo. Over time, Re came to be syncretized with other sun deities, especially Amon. Hathor. The goddess Hathor was usually depicted as a cow, as a woman with the head of a cow, or as a woman with cow's ears. Hathor embodied motherhood and fertility, and it was believed that she protected women in childbirth. She also had an important funerary aspect, being known as the Lady of the West. Tombs were generally built on the west bank of the Nile. In some traditions, she would welcome the setting sun every night. Living people hoped to be welcomed into the afterlife in the same way. Hathor was the goddess of love, music, and motherhood. She was often depicted as a cow or as a woman with cow horns and a sun disk. Hathor played a dual role as a nurturing mother and a fierce protector, representing the balance of feminine qualities. Anubis. Anubis was concerned with funerary practices and the care of the dead. He was usually represented as a jackal or as a man with the head of a jackal. The association of jackals with death and funerals likely arose because Egyptians would have observed jackals scavenging around cemeteries. Anubis was the god of mummification and the afterlife. He guided the souls of the deceased through the underworld and weighed their hearts in the judgment ceremony against the feather of Maut, representing truth and justice. Anubis had the head of a jackal. In the Old Kingdom, circa 2575 to 2130 BCE, before Osiris rose to prominence as the lord of the underworld, Anubis was considered the principal god of the dead. According to the Osiris myth, Anubis embalmed and wrapped the body of the murdered king, becoming the patron god for embalmers. Thoth. Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom, could be depicted in the form of a baboon or a sacred ibis or as a man with the head of an ibis. He was believed to have invented language and the hieroglyphic script and to serve as a scribe and advisor for the gods. As the god of wisdom, Thoth was said to possess knowledge of magic and secrets unavailable to the other gods. In underworld scenes showing the judgment undergone by the deceased after their deaths, Thoth is depicted as weighing the hearts of the deceased and reporting the verdict to Osiris, the god of the dead. Thoth was the god of wisdom, writing, and the moon. He played a crucial role in the judgment of souls in the afterlife, recording their deeds to determine their fate. Thoth was often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis or a baboon. Bastet. In her earliest forms, The cat goddess Bastet was represented as a woman with the head of a lion or a wild cat. She took the less ferocious form of a domestic cat in the first millennium BCE. Bastet, also known as Bast, was an ancient Egyptian goddess associated with home, fertility, and protection. She was particularly revered as a guardian deity and was often depicted with the head of a lioness or a domestic cat. The worship of Bastet evolved over time, reflecting different aspects of her character and the changing beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. In later periods, she was often represented as a regal-looking seated cat, sometimes wearing rings in her ears or nose. In the Ptolemaic period, she came to be associated with the Greek goddess Artemis, the divine hunter and goddess of the moon. The multifaceted nature of Bastet, encompassing both nurturing and protective aspects, reflects the complexity of Egyptian religious beliefs. She remains one of the iconic figures in the Pantheon, symbolizing the interconnectedness of domestic life, protection, and the divine. Amon. Before rising to national importance in the New Kingdom, circa 1539 to 1292 BCE, the god Amon was worshipped locally in the southern city of Thebes. Amon was a god of the air, and the name probably means the hidden one. He was usually represented as a man wearing a crown with two vertical plumes. His animal symbols were the ram and the goose. After the rulers of Thebes rebelled against a dynasty of foreign rulers known as the Hyksos and re-established native Egyptian rule throughout Egypt, Amon received credit for their victory. In a form merged with the sun god Re, he became the most powerful deity in Egypt, a position he retained for most of the New Kingdom. Today, the massive temple complex devoted to Amon-Re at Karnak is one of the most visited monuments in Egypt. These are just a few of the many deities in Egyptian mythology, each with its own unique attributes and stories. The religious beliefs of ancient Egyptians were deeply intertwined with their daily lives, rituals, and the concept of Maut, the cosmic order that governed the universe. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.